Okay, I'll be doing my presentation on the intersection of gender and disability by Salvador Ferreira. In this presentation, my research question is: how does gender differences affect access to healthcare and disability services for individuals with disabilities? And in turn, how does this affect their health outcome? So, I will be going over briefly gender and how it relates to disability and the health outcomes of it. Um, I chose this because, disability is something that affects a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people possibly have at least a family member um, that they know of that is disabled. So I feel like a lot of people can really relate to it. I think it's not only interesting, but I think it's also important. And I think when you examine, whether it's your socio-economic factors or race, the underlying theme in a lot of these is that women are still more affected, even in those groups that are already affected. So I think it's interesting and it's important. So disability. According to the World Report on Disability, approximately 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability. So, a lot of people everywhere are disabled. And the way we can approach this are two different ways. We have the medical model and we have the sociological model. With the medical model, this is more the traditional view. Um, it's It perceives disability as an inherent issue within an individual's mind or body that should be corrected, if possible. Um, Obviously, hey, you can't walk. Uh, I think most people would want to walk, right? So it's this constant reminder that, in a way, that the body is the problem. It's the body. I attached that picture up there of the medical model of disability. Um, and they're basically saying it's in turn the person that's disabled basically views themselves as the problem in the medical model, and I think that's where we approach it with the sociological model, which it explores how disability restricts individuals from engaging in activities due to societal responses to bodies that deviate from social expectations. So if it's basically, how are these people excluded from, I guess, the everyday human experience? Just to be able to, you would only assume that it's right, it's normal. Everybody should walk and talk, right? And we want everybody to walk and talk. And if you can't, you're disabled in some way, you're not essentially normal. And I think it's because of the medical model of the way we're perceiving this, and that's why we have another way to look at it. And so when doing this, we learned that, when someone experiencing a mental health, physical, or learning disability during childhood or adolescence, this is correlated with a more challenging socioeconomic outcome in adulthood. And we know that whenever things like your socioeconomic status comes into play, your education might not be prioritized. And if your education is not prioritized because, hey, you have a disability, there, whereas you can say right? A lot of kids in school who maybe we say the majority, right? They don't have a disability, so they just go to school and that's what they focus on is their education. But to the ones who have a disability, they may not be able to do that. So, you know, they can have a lower chance of completing high school. And if that was the case, individuals who did not complete high school are more than twice as likely to report poor health and a lower quality of life compared to those who graduated high school or attained a higher level education. And how does this tie in with gender? Well, as I said earlier, 15% of the world was about there was living with some form of disability. The prevalence of disability among women is 60% higher than that of men. We'll be using there are terms, very common terms. We have people with disabilities, PWD, women with disabilities, WWD, and sexual and gender minorities, SGM, with disabilities. So sexual and gender minorities with disabilities. This is one that I learned just doing this. It is the people that have the disability within the LGBTQ plus community. Um, so right off the bat, um, we can see that women with disability usually are unemployed and are not able to pay for needed services. Factors such as poverty, unemployment, financial dependence, being single, high transportation costs, lack of insurance coverage. These are the main obstacles that prevent women with disabilities from accessing healthcare. Um, we've also seen that women with intellectual disabilities are more likely to report lower levels of physical activity and higher rates of being overweight compared to women without disabilities. So, you can conclude that, obviously with higher rates of being overweight and then on top of that, lower physical activity, you're most likely experiencing, like this study is about, a worse health outcome. We've also seen, I'll go over it a little bit in the analysis more, but at age 14, we will see that girls and students with disabilities reported the lowest levels of school satisfaction. And to go back to the SGM with disabilities, they in particular, uh, where they're affected is that they can have limited access to knowledgeable practitioners, and this all often results in their healthcare needs being neglected, with persistent self-reports of harassment. And then we're gonna see how not only gender interacts with or intersects with disability, but how this ties in with healthcare and disability services. Um, we will see that women with disabilities are more likely to have unmet healthcare needs than their non-disabled counterparts. So that means within the women community, obviously within the general community as well, disabled people are having a harder, a lower health satisfaction, right? And then you're seeing that within the women group as well. So in the United States, women with disabilities are less likely to report receiving a PAP test compared to women without disabilities. Um, and these the way women are affected are much more severe when we look at developing nations because of low health literacy, insufficient communicative tools in healthcare settings, lack of necessary skills and training among healthcare providers, and a whole lot of other things that come with a developing country. Um, they do say that in developing countries, transportation remains one of the most significant obstacles to physically assessing healthcare facilities. So in a lot of developing countries, they still haven't caught up to having all these disability services, like as far as like ramps and for their hospitals, and this makes it for their disabled, where we see higher rates of people that are disabled, um, having even worse healthcare, when we compare it to here in the US. The research method that I used was secondary data, which is also known as textual analysis, which it refers to data gathered from existing research conducted by other scholars, historians, economists, educators. These are peer-reviewed people. These are experts, people that write for statistical, factual things, right? So we know that they use what we learn, the empirical research, to prove what they're proposing, right? So this method is commonly employed to merge respective data sets in order to investigate new or additional questions for a secondary data analysis. So we're merging in a lot of peer-reviewed expert things to create this secondary analysis. We're going to be analyzing, secondary data. This is not our original data. There are, little other methods like secondary data analysis. You can use content analysis. I won't be doing it on this one, but just saying that it's why I chose this research method was because it was a brief literature review. This is my first time doing one. I never done one before, so I did have a little bit of difficulty with this assignment. It took a lot of time for me. So I was really trying to perfect and trying to answer all the questions, and just for this particular assignment, secondary data, I'm going out and I am analyzing all this. I'm reading it, and then we're going to the discussions of what were the final results, and then those final results I am making a conclusion and tying it into my literature review, basically. So my analysis of what I got out of this assignment was two main things, of which I guess with analysis I'm trying to prove as if it's a fact. Individuals obviously with disabilities generally experience poor health compared to those without disabilities. That's not for debate. They do. They generally do experience poor health compared to those without disabilities. But within that group, women, for them, factors such as poverty, unemployment, financial dependence, being single, and like I said, for the third world developing countries, high transportation costs, and here, it could be here, lack of insurance coverage. These are the primary obstacles preventing women with disabilities from accessing healthcare, right? So, because we're trying to figure out here, we're examining why is there this disparity within the gender, between man and woman, and sexual and gender minorities. So, but there's not a lot of research on SGM. So most of the data here will be comparing, in a what you call gender binary, right? Or just people just being, it's just man and woman in these studies here. We know that we're trying to figure out why there's this disparity. And I would like to use school satisfaction to examine it, because in the USA we send our kids to school, right? And it's a normal thing for everybody to go to school. So school satisfaction is a good way to see how a student is coming along, how they're how they're communicating with their peers. Are they able to? Are they included? And we have seen that studies shown that at the age of 14, girls reported lower levels of school satisfaction, as well as people with disabilities. More specifically, dexterity-related disabilities, people that probably can't get dressed themselves, etc. Right, stuff with their hands. And we know that if you do have a lower level of school satisfaction, it will affect your education. And we've seen studies where children who enjoy school experience a protective factor against health compromising behaviors, while the ones that didn't, they were more likely to engage in health risk behaviors, report low self rated health, and experience increased somatic and psychological symptoms. So because of this, their education doesn't come first, and maybe they're not included. Their school satisfaction goes low. These are things that we can observe, and this will ultimately affect their health outcome. They don't pass school, like I said earlier, and now you're more than twice as likely to have a lower quality of life. One thing I would like to conclude with this presentation, I guess my giveaway, I guess my takeaway, my something to ponder with would be, why do we have these health disparities between men and women with disabilities? Well, I would like to propose that it lies somewhere within the disability services offered. I would like to say it's sort of, I guess here in America, the culture. Um, I don't know. Just hear me out. So, the study published in the Journal of American Medical Association, they were exploring gender disparities in informal home care among elderly individuals with disabilities. And they found that one, most disabled women, they lived alone, 45% compared to 16%. So disabled women were more likely to live alone than disabled men. And we know that disabled married women will receive fewer hours of informal care than disabled married men. And informal care is free care. It's like they're not getting paid for it. And we'll see that married women received 80% more informal home care hours than disabled women living alone. Why I say culture, I say because I'm proposing a woman has to be married to a man in order to receive 80% more informal home care hours. And in that same study, they will, I didn't include it in here, but they'll also tell you that the married woman is also more likely to have to be helped by her children rather than her husband, but the husband is more likely to be helped by his wife, and if not his wife, a woman. Why is that? You can say, hey, maybe it was because they have a family, right? Well, but even when you compare a married woman to a married man, you can say they both have a family. The married men still will receive 230% more informal care than the unmarried. But in the same study, they also, they receive 230% more than unmarried. So married men receive 230% more than unmarried. I forgot to include it in here. But the married men receive way more, even in the same circumstance, more informal care than a married woman. So they both have a family, they both have kids, they both same everything, but he's still more likely to receive better care. And they're both disabled, so they're both going to be affected. So that's just kind of I like a secondary data analysis, proposing a new question. Maybe it lies somewhere within the power structure of man and women. Women always serving men, and even in disabled, they exhibit better health outcomes. That is my presentation.